Hi, it's Richard here from Intelligent Advisor IT Consulting with our little video about migrating the Energy Saver example project to a flow. You'll recall from the previous video that we ran the Migrator tool, and that gave us a flow project with a bunch of rules that have been copied across, mostly intact, but a bunch of errors. Most of those errors will disappear when we start adding the flow, which is the part that wasn't migrated across. You'll recall from previous examples that in a flow, we don't use screens, we use pages. So I'm going to go ahead and add the first page, and the simplest way for me to do this is basically just to open up the Energy Saver project in OPM and try and rebuild as much as possible something similar in a flow, bearing in mind that flows are brand new and there's not a feature equivalence for everything. But anyway, let's put in a title for our first page, and the first page just has a piece of static text. So just like in OPM, it's going to be a label. There we go. So that part's nice and similar. Now that we have our first page, we can get on with the second one. The second page, which we'll add now, has a couple of things that we'll need to deal with in a slightly different way. So the second page, which I'm going to put, if I can manage to drag and drop, there we go. Second page is all about lighting, and this one has a Boolean question in it and an image. So we'll put in the title and we'll start by putting in the question. Does your household use all Energy Saver light bulbs? So we'll see if that field was copied across, and so we'll add a question. And this, to do it in the flow, you go over onto the right hand side and enter the caption. So you have to enter that manually, and then you type ahead to find the field you're interested in. So it's going to be populating this field. There are no read-only or required or any changes that I want to make over in that panel for the time being. The second challenge we have in this screen is the fact that we need an image. You'll recall that in the standard flow schemes that I've seen, there are no images. So we created a special extra control which allows us to enter the URL of a logo image and use the renderer to render it as an image. So I'm just going to use that one, and if you don't remember that, I think that was back in part 3 or part 4 of our current series. So I have to just make sure that I enter the right URL to the image. The image will be extremely large and extremely ugly, but at least it will be an image. Now the appliances page requires a bunch of questions. So we're going to add several different Boolean questions, same way as we did before. Now the appliances page has a bunch of questions on it, so I'm just going to put them on using the same technique. So using the question control. The interesting thing about this from a migration point of view is that I noticed that not all of the attributes were copied over to fields in the flow. For example, this one, the air conditioner question. So I actually have to just type it in manually, even though it's not showing up in the set value for, and that will create my input field. So I'm going to carry on and spare you the details of doing all of these because they're all very similar. Sometimes the attribute is there and sometimes it isn't. If it isn't there copied into a field, I can just type in the field text for set value for, and the flow will do the rest and create the input field. So I'll do all of that now. Yes, there's another one where the attribute wasn't copied over to a field, so I just have to type it in manually here as I would wish it, according to the rules that I've written. As you can see, I can't find it, so I'm just going to type it in manually. And I'll use the OPM attribute name as my starting point. And just type it in. So that will create the input field. So we're done pretty much for our appliances, and now we can move on to the next page. This has a drop down, which I'm just going to add a different way in flows. So the drop-down itself I can add here, and I'm going to use what's called an inline list. And the inline list will be a series of values, as you can see, just typed into the properties window on the right. And the important thing is that each value needs to have a display value and a value, like option 1, option 2, option 3, and so on, because that's how you're going to reference this thing in your rules. You'll notice that I pretty much have all the rule errors gone, and the only errors that are remaining in my rules are actually relative to the values in these drop downs. So I'm just going to go ahead and add value names to each of these, because you're going to reference them using this name. So this is going to take a little longer than I would have hoped. Let's accelerate through this. To eliminate the remaining errors in my rules, I need to edit how I refer to the values in the drop-down using the colon syntax that you might have seen already in one of our other demos. So I'm going to make sure that the number value is compared to the value that's selected, because the whole idea was that it had to be greater than 75. So I need to make sure that, okay, there we go. I compare the 75 value with the value in the field, and our error disappears, and I'll probably need, or I need to do exactly the same with the other remaining error, because that's also in a situation where the rule uses a drop down. So there you go. 75 was the original value, saying it has to be, if it's greater than 75, you need to be advised on the optimal temperature. And I'll do, once I've done that for the air conditioning, I'll need to go and do it for the other one as well. Uses a reference to a value in the drop-down. Now there are other ways of getting values into drop-downs. It's not just an inline list. You can use a record list or an external. But if you're using inline list, you'll need to refer to them using the list name. Essentially in the background, when you create an inline list, it's creating an object. And then you need to use a kind of object and field name and value syntax to refer to something from the drop-down list. Okay, in this case, I don't think it was 95. I think it was 75. Sorry, I don't think it was 75. I think it was 95, and I just want to make sure that I get the field name right. There we go. And I think it wasn't option 75. It was... Oops. Colon, and it was option... Oh yeah, it was option 75. So you'll also notice that the Fahrenheit field has underscores because it originally had parentheses, which you can't have in a flow project. There we go, no more errors in a while. So there's the basic drop-down, and then we'll move further on to the end of this particular demonstration, because the next interesting page is the swimming pool page, because the swimming pool page has a couple of numbers. And how many hours do you keep your pump running in the winter and in the summer? So I get to use the number control, and I get to add a visibility rule that says only show this if the person has a swimming pool. And we'll do the same for the number of hours you keep your pump running in the winter. Now that we've done all of these, we can consider the other challenges. Many of these will have visibility issues, visibility rules, but this one has a substitution. So in the original OPM, there was substitution used in here to say, don't forget to turn off your appliance, whatever it was. So to use substitution, you need to go back to the label caption and click that little X in parentheses, and then you can type in the name of the field, as I'm doing now. And select the field, and that will be your substitution. So this label has both substitution and a visibility rule. In this case, this visibility rule is a negative, whereas in OPM we would have written it in a negated version, a negated format. You can't do that in Flow, so you have to use the not function. So I had to use the not function. There it is. I just saw it again. Some of these will require bolding. So if you need to use the bold feature, if I can find one here, yeah, you actually have to, it's a little annoying. You actually have to select the text in the label. You can't just click the label and say, make it bold. You have to select all the text in there. And if you're going to use a label with HTML content, you'll see there's actually a little flag over there that says HTML content. So I'm going to go ahead and do all of these labels. These are the ones on the final page. You can use the OPM project as your reference point. This is the final page where we give you advice, and the advice is shown or hidden depending on the questions that we asked earlier on. So if you don't have a swimming pool, we're not going to give you advice about a swimming pool, and so on. So far so good. So we've added some labels, we've made them bold, we've given some of them visibility rules, and we've given some of them a substitution. That all looks fine to me. So now let's come back to the question of the drop downs. So as you can see, in the original version it had a drop down with a bunch of numbers. I'm going to just make sure that this page is only displayed if you said you have a heater. So that's how you do page visibility. And we'll do the same for cooling, which is the other one that has a drop down on it. We'll say that this page is only available if you have an air conditioner. Oh, I think there's one more. Oh yeah, the ceiling fan page. So let's do the ceiling fan page visibility rule and say only if you have a ceiling fan. I think that's it as far as page visibility is concerned. So one thing you might have to look out for when you're rendering this is that each control in your flow scheme has an identifier. So if you're using a copy or a modified version of the original demo flow scheme, you might find that the identifier for number isn't the same as the identifier in the script that generates the actual HTML. So I've added this line to make sure that my numbers render properly. And now I'll start my debugger, fill in all the details, and fire up a session. And there's our page with our super ugly image, but at least the image is there. And we'll see our page of appliances, and we'll say we have most of these appliances. Maybe we don't have ceiling fans, we don't have these, we don't have that. We'll move across. We see our drop down, we select a value, we say this, and we come to the cooling. We skip any pages that aren't necessary for us because of our visibility rules. We say next, and we finish all of this. Now change this a bit. And keep moving. Yeah. Okay. Yes. And we have a swimming pool. So now we can enter our values in our number that's been rendered properly. And we see our advice page with the dynamic advice based on the different things that we said we had and that we didn't have. Pretty cool, huh? So there's our energy saver migrated successfully. See you next time.